What's up, Packer fans? I'm Untitled Chapter, host of Cornerback Packers podcast. Thank you for being here. Thank you for checking out this video. Defense wins championships, and defense may have caused the Green Bay Packers a championship last year, specifically stopping the run. So I want to dive into the defensive side of the ball at this point and see. I mean, the Packers, they took a defensive player, the first overall pick, the last 8 seasons. They're not going to do it again. It's absolutely, it can't be, it's not going to happen. It won't happen. Guys, it is time to pour ourselves another Packers podcast. All right, so as we get started, I do owe you guys an apology. This video was supposed to come out on Monday, but I actually came down with a little bit of a fever, nothing excessive, nothing scary, corona-related, thank God. I believe I am healthy. I believe I am fine, but I have actually been a little bit quarantined the last couple days, and just trying to get back up on my feet because the draft is tonight. It is taking place. I will probably do a live stream, even though there's just a lot of various like college football players that I don't really know, but maybe you guys can chime in. And if the Packers decide to trade up, I just pray to God that they don't trade back, and then I end up just talking about nothing Packer related for the entire evening. But I plan on doing a live stream tonight. But today, this video, as you're watching, I want to dive into the defensive side of the football. There were some moving pieces on the defense this offseason, and as I mentioned, I mean, we had 8 straight seasons. You look at last year, I was absolutely certain the Packers would not take a defensive player in the first round last year, but lo and behold, they took 2 defensive players in Rashawn Gary and Darnell Savage. So who knows? Who knows what the Packers are going to do? Who knows what Gutekunst is going to do? I think he's always had the mantra of taking the best player available on the board, and it's really going to just kind of see how that pans out. And as we look at our roster, I mean, they pick up a guy like Funches. They pick up the defensive, the linebacker that they picked up, Christian Kirksey. I was going to get to him in a little bit later. They filled some void along some of these holes that left in free agency. So they don't necessarily have to go out there and grab a receiver if it's a stretch. They don't have to grab a linebacker if it's a stretch. But I do see them just kind of seeing how that board plays out and going from there. But as we dive into the defense, I want to start in probably the better equipped, if not the best equipped position on the defensive side of the ball, and that has to be safety. Now, the reason why I say that is you have a soon-to-be second-year future pro and Darnell Savage. You have Adrian Amos obviously right there beside him. There was some stability behind those two in Will Redmond and Raven Green, because we do only have 4 safeties on our roster at this point. And then there's a guy by Ibrahim Campbell, who is still an unrestricted free agent, depending on how the draft plays out this weekend. Maybe they decide to bring him back or not. But I actually really like our safety group, especially when you have Amos and Savage healthy. It's one of I'm really just a big fan. I was going to say they're one of the top safety duos in the league, but I'm not going to make that assumption or make that assertion at this point. But they're 2 very talented guys. I like what we have at the safety group, and I think Savage is only going to get better year over year. So as I talk about my potential draft odds, this is probably one of the lowest spots that I actually see us taking a player at safety. I have about a 20% chance of the Packers drafting a safety throughout this weekend. Maybe later in the the 6th or 7th round, they do have a lot of late round picks. Maybe they pick up a guy that fell to them at that point in the draft, and they go ahead and take a safety. But I don't think they need to go out there. I don't think they need to stretch or make any crazy early round decisions at the safety position. They have to really like. And like I said, that's one of the few places that I think the Packers can take a deep breath and know that they have talent at that position. So let's move on to another relatively good position as well, and that's the defensive line. Not a bad-looking group when healthy. Area of focus number 1, of course, for this defensive line and for the Packers defense last year was stopping the run. Some of that will be on the linebackers, that they should have done a better job, and we'll get to that in a second. But if there's going to be an area of improvement that they got to look at, is maybe another run-stopping defensive tackle, defensive end. Kenny Clark obviously is the man of the hour when it comes to the defensive line, entering his 5th-year option And after this season, unless he signs another contract, which I do expect the Packers to go out there and re-sign him before the start of the regular season, whenever the hell that's going to take place. But I do expect them to re-sign Kenny Clark at some point. I think he is too valuable of a player. You can't obviously pay everyone, but I think Clark is a guy that you have to pay. Kingsley Keke is another defensive lineman. We drafted him last year. Dean Lowry is hanging around on a very low contract as far as I'm concerned. Tyler Lancaster, and then Montravius Adams is kind of that question mark defensive lineman, defensive tackle that we have. So for me, I mean, since 1991, the Packers have taken a defensive tackle or a defensive end somewhere in the draft since 1991. That's only because I didn't want to keep going further back in their draft history just to see if they took a defensive lineman. I kind of got exhausted after 20 years of drafts. So it is like clockwork that the Packers are going to pick up somebody along that defensive line. So my potential draft odds should be a no-brainer is 100%. Again, that the Packers will take someone along that defensive line. Potentially a 6th round pick is my opinion. They have 3 of those guys, but maybe they go with a 5th rounder. I don't think they go too early on in the draft. And if they do go very early on in the draft, we're talking like rounds 2, 3, 4, you might have to start questioning whether or not they truly will bring a Kenny Clark back for that 5th year option. But I don't think that's going to be the case. I think that they hang on to Kenny. I think they draft late in the round. And there's many other positions that we need to address, and that might include this next group, which is the linebackers. So we have 10 linebackers on our roster. Obviously, it's going to be the most crowded group, and it's also the most glaring hole on the entire defense, and maybe not so much on the outside linebackers position because we obviously have talent with Za'Darius and Preston Smith. But I'm talking about at inside linebacker, we have not really been able to find anyone to take over that position, dare I say, since the A.J. Hawk days of having an inside linebacker. So Blake Martinez, if you hadn't heard, this is your news that Blake Martinez did leave in free agency. He went on to sign a 3-year, $30 million contract with the New York Giants. And not many people wanted to keep Blake around. I was actually a pretty big proponent of keeping Blake around, and I specifically remember back to his last locker room interview after the loss to the San Francisco 49ers, and he was an emotional guy. He did not want to leave. His heart was in Green Bay, but maybe that was all just an act. Maybe money talks, and he is no longer bleeding the green and gold because he actually had some pretty big issues with Mike Pettin and some of his playmaking decisions. And I should mention, since I brought up the guy's name, yes, Mike Pettin will be back. Again, it is confirmed if I did not address that way back in January or early February when that news broke. So to fill the void of Martinez, the Packers went out there and signed Christian Kirksey to a 2-year, $16 million contract. It is a slightly better contract or more affordable contract versus what they paid Blake Martinez. So Kirksey is actually the type of player that fits in perfectly with the Green Bay culture, with the organization. He was drafted by the Browns in 2014. He was the 71st overall pick. He played all 6 of his seasons in Cleveland for the Browns. He actually played his first 2 seasons under Mike Pettin, so he will have a reunited and it feels so good moment with Mike Pettin whenever the players decide to get back together and don't have to be quarantined. But probably the biggest thing outside of just his history with Mike Pettin, I guess is what I want to say, is that he is a great guy. He fits in that locker room. He was the defensive captain back in college for the Iowa Hawkeyes. He's the team captain for the Browns in 2018. He was nominated for the Walter Payton Man of the Year award. He has struggled with injuries the last 2 seasons, so much that he's only played in 9 games the last 2 seasons, and that's really the biggest question mark that we have with this Kirksey guy coming into the Green Bay Packers and playing for this team. He has the ability to stop the run, and that was something that Blake obviously struggled with, is something that Oren Burks has struggled with, is something that entire interior or inside linebacker group has struggled with. So hopefully he can stay healthy. I think that he's going to get along really great with those Smith guys and really even gel that defense more than it already was last year. Stay healthy, do your job, and I think that's going to be really, he seems like the type of guy where you have filled a position of need, but maybe we still need now to go out there and find someone to go out there with them, because outside of, like I said, Za'Darius, Preston Smith, we have Rashawn Gary. I expect him to have a good year. But at the inside linebacker group, we have Oren Burks, Curtis Bolton, Ty Summers, who we drafted last season, and there's a couple other stranglers on the roster. Like I said, there's a total of 10 total guys on that linebacking group. So I think it's very obvious that the Packers will have to take an inside linebacker somewhere in this draft. My potential draft odds is right up there at 90%. It's a very high odds of them taking an inside linebacker. And I think it's someone that potentially they take somewhere around that 4th or 5th round pick if I were to predict that myself. So only time will tell. But like I said, you lose Blake, you bring up a guy like Christian. I think things will work out fairly well with that defensive line. And by adding some of these guys, like I said, Gutekunst doesn't have to put himself in a position to stretch or make any drastic moves. Maybe let the board fall as it needs to fall. And that will take us then into the cornerbacks group. So I saved this group for last specifically because there's unknowns all over this entire group. Let's start off with this. So 7 guys in the cornerback group. Tramon Williams is technically at this moment an unrestricted free agent and doesn't show up on the Packers roster, but he has expressed that he would love to come back to Green Bay. He's expressed that he would love to play another season, perhaps another 2 seasons in the NFL. So I would expect, depending on how this draft shakes out, I would expect the Packers to finally make that decision very shortly after the NFL draft is over. If they don't come away with the cornerback, I think that they do make the move and bring back Tramon Williams because he needs someone to play that nickel corner position, and he did just an admirable job of doing that this last season. I know there are some Williams haters out there, but the guy can still ball. He might be older, but he can still ball. So with Williams gone, that leaves us with Jair Alexander, Kevin King, Shandon Sullivan, Josh Jackson, Kadar Holman, who they drafted last year, Kabion Ento, and Deshaun Amos. And Deshaun was actually a teammate of Reggie Bigleton at the Calgary Stampeders in the Canadian Football League last year. So we have 2 Canadian football players officially making our roster. So I absolutely, you have to love what we saw, especially later on in the season with Alexander and Kevin King. And yes, Kevin King was that guy that I absolutely hated for most of the season, but he really came into his own at the end of the season. He's heading into the final year of his rookie contract, and I think that he potentially could make some waves and have himself a breakout year. Now, I feel like I've said this before, a deja vu moment, if you will, but he played very well in the late stretches of the season, in the playoffs. He was shutting down wide receivers, and if he can now take that momentum and some of that, I guess, confidence that he gained last year, go into his contract season and actually just absolutely kill it, I think that would be phenomenal for what we have at the 1 and 2. But outside of those 2, things get blurry. I mean, Shandon Sullivan filled in great at times last year and could benefit from another offseason. Josh Jackson has had an up and down career so far in the NFL and is kind of proven to be a wasted pick back in that 2018 draft, but maybe he comes around. There's actually been rumors of them trading him away possibly. And then Kadar Holman, who was drafted last year in the 6th round, I still don't really have a whole lot to say about that guy. He hasn't wowed me. I don't think there's nothing there. So outside of our top 2 cornerbacks, there's a lot of question marks, and I think that then leads the Packers to an 80% chance of drafting themselves a cornerback. Now, how high they take one of these cornerbacks will be a huge factor in whether or not Williams comes back for another season. But I would not be surprised if the Packers take a cornerback in the 2nd, 3rd round. Who knows? Maybe the 1st round. I don't even know anymore. But they definitely need to address something in that cornerback group, because if they do decide to not bring back Kevin King after this season, they are really in a tough spot at that cornerback group, and they need to add some sort of depth to that. So 80% chance they will take one, because I don't really think there's a whole lot of other options out there to sign. So that does it for the defense. I mean, for the most part, our defense was a vast improvement year over year in Mike Pettine's 2nd year and Matt LaFleur's 1st year. So the defense showed glimpses, and they had streaks last season where they held teams under 20 points, and they were able to close out games. There's a lot of good things that come from this defense, and I think that the focus still needs to stick on the offensive side of the ball to find some weapons for Aaron Rodgers, to find an offensive lineman somewhere along there, maybe find another running back to add to the group. But if we're going to look at the defense, we're looking at the cornerback group. We are looking at the linebacker group. We're definitely going to get a defensive lineman, because 20 years of history has proven that is a certain in the Packers draft. So we will find out later tonight. And by Sunday, I will sound like a complete fool on any of this stuff that I have talked about for the last 2 videos. So if you guys want to join me, I will subscribe. Obviously, subscribe. You get a notification when I go live. And we'll kind of see how it goes. Well, I think we'll hang out for that first night draft. And if it's a good turnout, maybe we'll do the rest of the weekend. It's obviously all going to be live streamed because there is no physical presence that is capable of happening right now as I struggle with my words. So it's all going to be digital. It's going to be a giant Zoom meeting for the NFL draft. It'll be interesting to see how that pans out. But if you want to be part of the internet draft party, I will be streaming as well, and we can all hang out and talk Packers stuff, ask me your questions. It'll be good to hang out with some of you guys as well. So until next time, until tonight perhaps, I will see you, beautiful people, Packers fans, on the internet. Thanks for watching.